So our life is affected being judgmental when we believe the judgments, when we believe the criticism, when we believe that what we say and what's flowing through our minds is actually truth with a capital T. The productivity of the soil, the condition of the soil determines the productivity of the seed. So the condition of you determines the productivity of the seed, your dreams, your desires, your wants, all of the things that you're looking to achieve in life, to experience in life. The condition of the soil, who you be, determines the productivity of your dreams. And you hinder the productivity when you're in judgment. You hinder the productivity when you're gossiping. You hinder the productivity when you're criticizing others and going against life. So that hinders the productivity of the seed.
Because he loves you. If there's any judgment to be done, he's going to do it. But he's not there to judge you. He's there to let you make your merry way, and he's there to support you and give you all the love that you are willing to absorb.
Heaven is thought of without judgment. Heaven is seeing the truth. Heaven is allowing who I am to have the experience of being who I am. There's no judgment on the part of God. God only sees the truth. And the reason God, whatever that is, only sees the truth, because that's all there is. So what we made up by making major formal religions is making up a God that's just like my ego.
Judgment is another form of the ego's way of fueling. See, you're right, they're wrong. See, told you. It's another way of shoring up separation. All these things that you're asking me they're no different. They're no different. They're part and parcel of the same ego's thought system. They're labels put on things to define, in the ego's terminology, what reality really is. And that's not your reality. Your reality, again, is you are the holy offspring of God itself. Nothing can harm you.
Judgment, first of all, is making it real, because if you're not making it real, you wouldn't have anything to judge. And it's a condemnation. That's really what you have to overcome. You'll notice in my books, when my teachers talk about forgiveness, they're not talking about forgiving the good stuff. You know, they're not talking about forgiving the romantic walks on the beach and the beautiful sunsets and, you know, all the good experiences that you have. That's not where your unconscious guilt and all that garbage I was talking about that's in the mind is. That's really where the negative emotions are. So what you want to forgive is the things that kind of like push your buttons. You know, people that rub you the wrong way, something doesn't go your way, that's an ego special. You don't get what you want. You know, that's a classic. The ego has set you up in a life where you can't get everything that you want. You know, it's not physically possible to get everything you want or to have everything you want or to do everything that you can do. You've already been set up to fail. And then in the end, you're going to die. You know, that's the ego's brilliant approach to making you happy. But there is something better than that can be awakened to through undoing the ego. And to undo the judgment, you have to undo your reaction to it. And you're knowing that your judgment is making it real, you have to kind of like give up making it real and instead look for something better, which is there in the right part of your mind.
It's the problem with humankind right now. We are still in an asleep state, believing things that aren't true. So our job is to wake up, and the waking up can't happen as long as judgment is desirable and seems like good. And people mistake judgment for wisdom in some way. Like, I've got to have the good judgment to do this. Judgment is just anything that separates things out, that divides things into the good pile and the bad pile, and the acceptable pile and the unacceptable pile. So as long as I'm going to be judging something, like I've decided where it fits in the general spectrum of good and bad, so to speak, then waking up is going to have to be postponed. I can't wake up to my own loving nature, which would necessarily accept all Accepting is a verb that doesn't apply when you're experiencing oneness. It's like, that's such an astonishing experience that the idea of I'm accepting this doesn't make sense, because that accepting is what you do on your way to this. Because when you experience yourself as oneness, as everything, the whole idea of accepting, which is a kind of a mental thing, is not even in the picture.
And the ego is a very potent energy that, as one begins to sense the freedom, will come in and find a stimulated reason why we'll judge someone else or judge ourselves or what have you. But it's all based on fear and conflict, choosing conflict rather than love, rather than peace. So in our work in attitudinal healing, as with the Course, inner peace is our one goal. We don't have multiple goals. We make sure that every time we breathe and talk or be with someone, that we see peace of mind as our goal. And the people that we work with, whether they have cancer or AIDS or relationship problems or business problems, really grab the concept that when I'm holding on to a judgment, when I'm interpreting people's behavior, then I'm causing myself to feel separate from others rather than at one with others and at one with my source.
And if you judge, go to the source of why you need to judge. What's that judgment giving you? Power over somebody? Because you feel they might be better than you or whatever. So you got to bring it back to your own emotional being to free yourself, if you want, from that judgment.
But it's actually a defense mechanism. It's a way for us to avoid facing our own self-hatred. And this goes back to what we were talking about earlier with the shadow and our dragons. If we have a particular dragon, let's say it's that part of us that is mean and nasty, shall we say, right? We push that into our shadow and deny that it's there. Hide it, okay? It becomes totally unconscious. But I talked earlier on about the idea that we have this inner healer. Well, if we are going to awaken, we have to bring some of this stuff up for healing. We can't be separated within. Because we talked about separation earlier on. Well, there's no, we separate, even within ourselves, we separate from what I call the cool part of us and the uncool, which is the shadow. So we're separated within. So when we go through our awakening process, that we need to integrate those two parts of us in order to become whole. Because we can't talk about being awakened if we're split. So we have to bring ourselves together. But there's a great resistance to that, and as soon as these demons or dragons start to come up, it creates a lot of angst in us, and a lot of fear that we might be acquainted with this part of ourselves that we really hate, and let alone anybody else should see it. So the best way to get rid of it is to project it onto someone else. And by doing that, we actually manufacture a person. We attract someone into our life that has a lot of this quality in them. A mean and nasty person, okay? Oftentimes this can be a politician who is acting in a way that is crass and undesirable, and everybody hates it. But nevertheless, it's an opportunity for us to then project that part of us onto that person and then blame them for being the way they are. Then we can judge them and say, you are a terrible person, and I'm so self-righteous about this now, blah, blah, blah. So that's the projection mechanism. And we do it all the time. It's everybody does it. And we use television to project onto characters and all sorts of things, our judgments onto them. But putting it now back into the spiritual context, we use the mechanism of projection to recognize that what we're judging in another person is exactly what we're denying and rejecting in ourselves. And so this is an opportunity to forgive ourselves, actually. So we forgive the person, and in doing so we forgive ourselves, and we accept and love that part of ourselves that's mean and nasty, because it might only be that little tiny piece that's mean and nasty, but we've been shamed into thinking that we were that, and that's who we are. So we've attracted this person who is very mean and nasty in order for us to get so agitated that we first of all project onto them and say, what a horrible person. And as a spiritual awakened person, we say, but wait a minute, what I'm recognizing in this other person is my own self-hatred, that part of me which I have denied, repressed, and projected onto him. And that's a big part of one of our worksheets. That's a thing we have to do in a worksheet. My wife and I mirror stuff for us all the time. we all criticize each other and say, you know what, we're both looking in the mirror. You know, and realize it. You see, that's the thing. Everybody does it, but most people do it without realizing that they're seeing themselves in the mirror. We have a saying, if you spot it, you got it. Right? If you spot it, you got it. And the more upset you are with the person that you're upset about, the more it's yours. And the bigger the opportunity to heal something within you and forgive something within you. So the more we use this mechanism, the more self-loving we become, or self-accepting, shall I say, which I believe actually is one of the definitions of love, as we defined it, is unconditional acceptance of what is. And so it's a very powerful, extremely useful mechanism for self-forgiveness and self-love and self-acceptance. But not many people use it because they don't like to hear that they're projecting or that they're seeing themselves in the mirror whenever they see someone that they don't like. They don't like that. There's the one part of my workshop where people kind of get upset about that whole idea. They say, well, I'm not that. And they may not be in a direct way, but it could be, but symbolically they are, because if it upset them in any way at all, it's theirs. So we have to really help people work around this whole idea of seeing whatever is out there is a mirror of their own self-hatred, and it's an opportunity to heal that self-hatred once and for all. Yeah, so the idea of switching it from you are bad to I am bad is a good mechanism, or at least it makes you look at your judgment, because every time you judge someone else, it's really a judgment of yourself.
And if your unconscious mind knows everything, and if it knows that there's really just one of us, that means that it will interpret anything that you think about another person, or about the world, or even about an event that you see on TV. Whatever you think about it and put out there, your unconscious mind will interpret it to really be about you. Why? Because there's really just one of us. Your mind knows that. And people are putting out all this garbage their whole lives, their judgments and their opinions and their condemnations about other people in the world. And what they didn't realize was that it was just going to them, because there's not really anybody else out there for it to go to. People wonder why they're depressed. You know, they don't wonder why they don't feel good or why they're miserable. Well, just look at the garbage they've been thinking their whole lives about other people, about the world, about themselves, not realizing that it was just going directly into their own unconscious mind, because that's all there is, because there's just one of us. And that's what's causing them to feel so depressed and terrible and suicidal. But what if they knew better? What if they understood the power of the mind and the importance of switching from the wrong part of the mind to the right part of the mind? And if they did that in a disciplined manner, it would change everything. It could even change how they feel about themselves. People have no idea how good they could feel if they could just grab a hold of the power of the mind and change their mind and change the way that they look at the world and other people with the right part of their mind. If they could do that, they would feel better, eventually they could feel wonderful. They could feel so good it should be illegal. And at the same time, when they do that, they are slowly undoing this garbage that I was talking about that's hidden there in the unconscious mind. And as you clear that out, you have more access to spirit. You have more access to the right part of your mind. And the right part of your mind eventually will come to dominate your mind instead of the ego, instead of the wrong part of the mind.
The conditions to experience it is a quiet mind, the relinquishment of judgment. And if you think about it, judgments are just a whole bunch of thoughts. So as the mind gets quiet, as judgments are released, and this is obviously a process and not an event, it goes on all our lives and probably a lot of lifetimes if you subscribe to other lifetimes. So the process is letting go of judgment, being deeply grateful, having only the sense of how can I be helpful to everyone else. In other words, it's thinking that heads in the direction of oneness, or what's good for one of us must be good for all of us. So that gradually you adopt that perspective of we're all in this together, no judgment of any aspect of oneness. And then you can, people down through for thousands and thousands of years who've been recording such things, then experience that breakthrough of actually, literally experiencing themselves as everything. And it has nothing to do with the intellectual mind, except at that intellectual mind level, you make the choice. I'm going to choose to be loving to everyone, even when my ego mind is set up to make them wrong, to try to make them the problem, to try to make them different from me. In other words, so we've got to unlearn the judgment and the self-important, self-survival things in favor of gradually, we're all in this together kind of thinking.
The ego loves conflict. The ego loves judgment. Why? How can you keep the game going without judgment? And what causes judgment? Well, you got to make it real in order for judgment to prevail. But if you switch to the right part of your mind and you're forgiving and you're becoming more calm, then you can take a step, which is the third step, and I think it takes a while to get into the habit of doing it. You want to think of that person as not the false image that you're seeing, looking at it differently. It's like A Course in Miracles would say, now you're above the battleground. Now you're looking at it from a place where you're not stuck in it and you're not at the effect of it. And instead, you can think of people as, well, okay, they think that they're individuals, bodies, separate, and that all of this is real, but you know what? I know better. And I know that this is just a projection. Just like the Hindus said thousands of years ago in the Vedanta, this is not real at all. And I'm going to think of them not as being that separate individual that they think they are. I'm going to look at them and think about them as being what they really are, which is the wholeness of oneness, perfect oneness, the source, where you came from. You are exactly the same as your source. This is something that is immortal. It's invulnerable. It's something that can't be threatened by anything in this world. It's something that can't even be touched by anything in this world. It's possible to get in touch with that and live like that instead of this temporary thing that by definition is going to be dead eventually anyway. That's not real. Whatever is temporary and transitory is not real. But what is real is permanent. Something that will never fade away, never die. God never dies, spirit never dies, and neither do you, because you're exactly the same as your source. And that's what's possible for you to get in touch with and live that way. You can go through life fearlessly in the attitude that there's nothing here that can hurt me, not really. Because what I am is nothing less than God. And I know that that'll sound arrogant to some people. I might as well say I am God, to say that I'm the same as God. But that's not really arrogance. What is arrogance is to think that you can be separate from your source and to think that you can be separate from God. That is the arrogance of the ego that believes in separation and wants to keep it going.